Well, for a closer look at what the future might hold for airports, let's bring in Joe Schwieterman from Chicago. He's a professor in the School of Public Service at DePaul University and an expert in public policy, transportation, and urban planning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So according to the Airport Council International, U.S. airports will lose nearly $14 billion this year. In any other industry, that could force some operators out of business. Could that actually happen to an airport?
Well, we're really seeing stress here. We really thought by July we would see the recovery, and now people are talking August. And, we've had such a tremendous run-up in air travel in the United States. I've been watching air travel for 30 years, and just the 5–6% growth has just been astounding. So airport authorities got a little confident, building terminals for massive expansion, and they're thinking twice now.
And we saw that the U.S. Transportation Department has allocated $10 billion in relief for airports. What can they use that for, and will that be enough?
Yeah, the airlines got their share, and the airports got a pretty good sum of money in the first round, too, to make them whole. And it's bought them a few months, and it's really been a good thing, but we're seeing that that's going to end. And now they have these really tough questions, like do you offer concessionaires, restaurants, discounts on the space? Do you offer airlines reduction in gate fees if they're not going to use those fees? That's when the whole discussion starts about how you're going to pay off debt. And that's why some airports have got pretty nervous about expansion projects.
And so what are some other countries doing to support their airports given these needs?
You know, it's interesting. All airports have a different experience. Here in Chicago, O'Hare has fared better than the rest of the country, I think because we are a hub for United and American Airlines. And when they shrunk, they sort of consolidated service through Chicago. But boy, airports that aren't hubs, that are routes to leisure markets, you look at Las Vegas and Orlando and places like that, it's just a really, really dire situation. Now, of course, air travel has a tendency to bounce back, and we're just waiting to see if this is like, say, the Great Recession. In 3 years it bounces back. But that vital information about public safety, how that's playing out, is still unclear.
Now, there are several different financial structures that airports can have. Some are fully government-owned, some are private, like Changi Airport in Singapore. You also have smaller non-profits for these smaller regional travel areas, as well as partnerships between the government and private investors. Are some models faring better than others in this situation?
I think mostly you look at airports that have strong municipal backing. We're here in Chicago, and the airport is really run by our city government, our two airports. And there's a long commitment there. There's not a lot of regional politics surrounding should we expand or not. They can stay the course. Of course, financially, it's difficult. It's much more difficult when you're an agency where you have lots of different governments that have input. Some feel one thing, some feel the other. And it can cause paralysis when it comes to expansion. And boy, in a lot of these outlying cities where they're building airports, anticipating traffic's going to double, they're in a really tough spot.
And in recent years, in fact, we have seen that there has been this rush to build bigger and more iconic airports, including Beijing's Daxing International Airport with the world's largest terminal. Are some of these then in danger of becoming white elephants if the travel numbers don't bounce back to pre-pandemic levels?
Well, I do think we did see a bit of an arms race, so to speak, of who could build the best terminal. Of course, Chinese airports have set the bar pretty high, but you look at the Queen's Terminal at Heathrow, and some things are happening in LaGuardia, just incredibly expensive projects. And I think everybody needs now to take a deep breath and say, is this too risky? And I think the one thing we're seeing is people are saying, we get new surprises with air travel. We have 9/11, we have the Great Recession, now we have this. Is this something you need to build into your financial statements, these kind of disasters? And this one, of course, could be the worst of all.
And obviously, it's not just where we travel, but also look at the design of the airports, all these ancillary things, where we shop and where we eat. What does this mean for the businesses there in future planning and designing of airports, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a tough one. In the short run, there's not a whole lot airports can do. They're crowded places. Every inch is being used, and you can't redesign airports so they're safe spaces without, big time investment. I do think what we're likely to see is a gradual build back. I think there's safety precautions in place, but in the long term, I think some of these lavish plans to build airports that have just beautiful public spaces where there's exquisite dining and things like that, that kind of opulence may not be a good deal for vendors that want to rent that space just because of all the uncertainty we're seeing in that kind of business.
Certainly is a wake-up call. Thank you so much. Joe Schwieterman there, Professor of the School of Public Service at DePaul University.